The Cartesian ontological argument. I'm reading through a book called The Oxford History of Western Philosophy, and it's really good as far as being broad, covering a lot of ground from Thales up through, I'm not sure who the most recent would be. Sartre, perhaps. At any rate, it doesn't go into a lot of depth, but it does cover a lot of ground. And it's edited by Anthony Kenny, who I believe is a atheist or agnostic. Don't quote me on that, but I think I saw somewhere a debate between him and Bill Craig, or an article in some journal about atheism or something by Anthony Kenny. And he actually co-authors one of the chapters, the one dealing with Descartes, with, let's see, trying to find the, no, I guess he's the only author of that chapter, Descartes to Kant, chapter 3. So I just want to talk a little bit about what he has to say about Descartes and what Descartes had to say about the ontological argument. So this is starting on page 122. The existence of God. In the Discourse on Method, Descartes argues for God's existence in the following manner, quote, I saw quite clearly that assuming a triangle, its three angles must be equal to two right angles, but for all that I saw nothing that assured me that there was any triangle in the real world. On the other hand, going back to an examination of my idea of a perfect being, I found that this included the existence of such a being in the same way as the idea of a triangle includes the equality of its three angles to two right angles, or the idea of a sphere includes the equidistance of all points of its surface from the center, or indeed in an even more evident way. Consequently, it is at least as certain that God, the perfect being in question, is or exists as any proof in geometry can be, unquote. So when I was reading these words of Descartes, quoted by Anthony Kenny, I thought, finally here is a philosopher who is making sense, making some good points about the ontological argument, which I happen to think is a compelling argument for theism. But then Anthony Kenny goes on to criticize the argument as Descartes posits it here. So Kenny goes on to say, Descartes clearly thought that theorems could be proved about triangles, whether or not there was actually anything in the world that was triangular. Similarly, therefore, theorems could be stated about God without begging the question whether there was a God or not. One such theorem is that God is a totally perfect being, that is, he contains all perfections. But existence itself is a perfection, hence God, who contains all perfections, must exist. One of Descartes' contemporary critics, the mathematician Pierre Gassendi, objected that existence could not be treated in that way. And here's a quote from Gassendi. Neither in God nor in anything else is existence a perfection, but rather that without which there are no perfections. Existence cannot be said to exist in a thing like a perfection, and if a thing lacks existence, then it is not just imperfect or lacking perfection, it is nothing at all, unquote. Descartes had no ultimately convincing answer to this objection. The non-question begging way of stating the theorem about triangles is to say, if anything is triangular, then it has its three angles equal to two right angles. Similarly, the non-question begging way of stating the theorem about divine perfection is to say that if anything is divine, then it exists. That may perhaps be true, but it is perfectly compatible with there being nothing that is divine. But if nothing is divine, then there is no God, and Descartes' proof fails. Well, the problem with this kind of objection, which was also reiterated by, I think, Hume, but more importantly by Immanuel Kant. Existence is not a predicate. That's the common way to summarize this kind of thing. But we're not talking about existence here. We're talking about necessary existence. A being that exists necessarily, to use the language of modal logic, is a being which exists in every logically possible world. So we are adding something to the concept of the divine being. We're adding something to the idea of a divine being when we say that he exists necessarily. We're not saying he exists. $100, to use Kant's example, could exist in reality or in the mind alone, but the idea of $100, says Kant, is not changed by saying that the $100 exists. However, if the $100 happened to exist in every logically possible world, if it necessarily existed, then I think we are adding something to the concept. And Kenny goes on to say, the argument which we have just presented and criticized seeks to show the existence of God by starting simply from the content of the idea of God. Elsewhere, Descartes seeks to show God's existence not just from the content of the idea, but from the occurrence of an idea with that content in a finite mind like his own. Thus, in the third meditation, he argues that while most of his ideas, such as the ideas of thought, substance, duration, and number, may very well have originated in himself, there is one idea, that of God, which could not have himself as the author. And this is the trademark argument. I cannot, he argues, have drawn the attributes of infinity, independence, supreme intelligence, supreme power from reflection on a limited, dependent, ignorant, impotent creature like myself, but the cause of an idea must be no less real than the idea itself. Only God could cause the idea of God, so God must be no less real than I and my idea are. So this is a second argument, not the ontological argument that we were talking about a moment ago, but the trademark argument. Then Kenny says, the argument here seems to be vitiated by an ambiguity in the notion of reality. Here, as in Zeus was real but mythical versus Zeus was a real thug, the fallacy in the third meditation argument seems to be related to the question-begging nature of the fifth meditation argument, though the precise relationship between the two arguments continues to puzzle students of Descartes. What is clear is that both arguments, the ontological and the trademark, are designed to be deployed while Descartes is still in doubt whether anything exists beside himself and his ideas. Remember, he said, I think, therefore I am. And now Descartes is going on to see if he can prove the existence of God by appeal to the ontological argument and the trademark argument. Kenny says this is an important matter since the existence of God is an essential step for Descartes towards establishing the existence of the external world. It is only because God is truthful that the appearances of bodies independent of our minds cannot be wholly deceptive. Because of God's veracity, we can be sure that whatever we clearly and distinctly perceive is true, and if we stick to clear and distinct perception, we will not be misled about the world around us. Then he goes on to talk about the Cartesian circle, which I'll have to wait for part 2 to address because I'm out of time for this video. Thank you.